All right. So we are here for a very special recording. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Vet S.O.S show, brought to you by the Who You Know Network. Remember, don't drown the sea of transition. Grab the Vet S.O.S lifeline. I'm here as always with my co-host Mark Elder. Mark, how you doing this evening?
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's show. We're super excited because we've got some great content for you. I know Joelle is going to drop some bombs, and she has also Dr. Marquez here too. She'll be joining us, and we're excited to hear about what they're doing to help veterans, both on the physical and the mental side of things. That is certainly something that everybody needs to hear, and I know it's at the top of a lot of veterans' minds.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So without further ado, Joelle, let me go through your bio real quick and we can get into talking. Do you want me to bring in Dr. Jennifer while we do the bio?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. There we go. How you doing today, Dr. Marquez?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
Outstanding. Glad to have you. Okay, so Joelle is a well-known psychotherapist, military psychology, and PTSD expert. Her passion is helping those in need find empowerment by discovering how to be their most true and successful selves by developing self-discovery and post-traumatic growth. As a psychotherapist, she uses reflective listening and encouragement to provide feedback and interaction that allows clients to make informed, healthy, and compassionate decisions. Her career highlights include being a guest speaker on ABC 60 Minutes, Beyond the Headlines, authoring a TED Ed video on PTSD, and several outstanding achievement awards for top female executives. We're so happy to have you both here today. Joelle, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this today and meet new people. So this is fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Absolutely. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I have watched friends of mine struggle with this. Some, unfortunately, took it all the way in the wrong direction. And many military people share that same experience. And it's something that we need to continue to find ways to chip away at it, if you will. So Joelle, can you tell us a little bit about, what you do, how you do it, what you got going on over there?
Sure. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and then did my clinical PhD, and I work under my marriage and family therapy license. And I first got into being interested in trauma through working with broad spectrum eating disorders, trauma and addictions. Well, I'm a ballerina by training. I did that for 22 years, so you can draw the dots. And was in my own therapy for trying to figure out my own trauma that I was later then diagnosed with PTSD, and then even later complex PTSD. And that started this journey of what does that actually mean and what does that look like? I'm a true civilian. I'm one of very few in the San Francisco Bay Area that actually takes TRICARE and the VA and has since 2013. I've worked with military since 2011, so I'm a military psychology expert, and fell into it. And I think it was sort of before that was being studied in school, right? So a lot of it was just learned experience, and it made sense. I grew up in a military family. My dad didn't deploy; that was not his role. But the personality type, right? That persona made a lot of sense, and I started working with a few military clients and went, oh, these are my people. Okay, I get this. And so I think it was kind of that started this experience of working with military and first responders, law enforcement, and then looking at PTSD as, what does that actually mean? Is it post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic stress disorder that affects our daily life and living, right? And then, how do we get beyond that? The and so what? Not so what, who cares about it? But so what does that actually mean? And how do we contextualize it in a way that we can work through it, right? And not forget it happened.
So can you maybe describe the difference between, you had mentioned, post-traumatic stress and then it being a disorder, but the difference between what people perceive, because I think a lot of people perceive PTSD, that word instills this image of shell shock and people that have been in combat, but that's not necessarily so, right?
Right. And for me, it's fundamentally important with the work that I do to really talk about post-traumatic stress, and that people who are military and veterans, retirees, whatever the process they're in, right? Military, first responders, law enforcement, of course their experiences are going to be post-traumatic, right? And there's a stress response holistically, mind, body, and spirit, how we think about things, how we internalize things physically, and how we emotionally, spiritually, whatever that looks like for people. That may be faith dependent and it may be ego, right? What that actually means. And trauma affects us so profoundly. And for some people, that experience turns into this disordered component, right? Where it's affecting their daily life and living and their functionality. They're not functioning the way they used to before the trauma. And so that's when this disordered component comes in. So for me, I start with this post-traumatic stress. When we experience trauma, whether it's something that's horrific, terrifying, and catastrophic that we experience to ourselves versus something that's witnessed, right? Juxtaposed to what I think of as micro traumas, something where we grow up with witnessing DV, or a parent that is narcissistic, right? And there's emotional abuse, relational traumas that stack up like Legos, right? All of these things are traumatic. It doesn't mean, just going to war, right? Is this big T horrible trauma, and you can't have PTSD if you don't have that experience, right? So it starts with this idea of when we experience things that are traumatic, we have a stressful response. For some people, that goes away over time. And for other people, it doesn't, right? And then maybe we have another traumatic response, or experience, right? And it's something that's a different episode. And then we experience that, and that may go away for some people and it doesn't for others, right? And so this idea of post-traumatic stress makes sense. Our bodies respond, our minds respond, we respond emotionally, and we hold that. And then for some people, they move forward, right? And for other people, they lose a little part of themselves, right? And so the disordered component is, well, when I can't deal with it anymore, right? Or when I'm not functioning the way that I used to, and it's overtaking my life, And so I think that with career, especially with I get to work with active duty military. It's one of the things that I do, and tier one soft teams. And I get the question all the time, well, why is it that it's bothering me now when it didn't 18 years ago, right? Or I've done this for 18 years and it never bothered me before. And I love the question, why do some of my friends end up with PTSD, but others don't? Right? They're great questions. I think we think of it as willpower, resiliency, right? Mental fortitude. And I don't know if any of that's true. I think it's all about how we process it in the moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, do you think some of that is just innate, or it's more nurture in how we process that?
Gosh, I wish I had that's like the magic. That is the magic question. And I wish I had like the ultimate answer. I think it's very individualized. I think what's traumatic for somebody who I'm talking to may not be traumatic for me, or vice versa, right? My trauma may not be traumatic to somebody else. And so trauma's in the eyes of the beholder. And I don't know if we talk about trauma in a way that helps people grieve the experience of this thing happened to me and I experienced it, whatever that looks like. And there's a grieving process of how I hold that. And we just, go suck it up, buttercup, move on, put your boots on, get out there at 05:30 and we're done, right? We don't have those moments where we allow people to really just sit in it, because it's not the way that we're socialized, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna give me PTSD with that comment alone. That was the biggest fight my wife and I ever had. I came back from a deployment and told her to suck it up and drive on. It was a long 2 weeks. I'm still struggling with that one a little bit. So you brought up the question of, or being asked the question, the 18-year mark. It's been 18 years. Why is it happening now? And I wanted to know more about that. I have a lot of friends, and myself included, going through the retirement process, and all these memories are flooding back. You're kind of reflecting on your whole career, everything going on, and there's memories and thoughts that you kind of bury deep down that start coming back up. And I've seen some people struggle with that pretty well. What is your experience in that realm when you're talking about sort of the end of the career? Is there some sort of scientific background to that, or?
Not a lot of scientific background, unfortunately, because there's that, like you asked earlier, the nature versus nurture question, right? There's not a lot of research. We have some very broad ideas of, if someone had pre-military trauma or exposure to traumatic situations, and that could include socioeconomic disparity, you name it, right? There's potentially a correlation to having post-military PTSD, but there's not a whole lot of information about that. My personal opinion, based on working with clients for a long time now, is threefold. One is, it's compartmentalized for so long, right? And I as a psychologist, right, I can't have you process all of your emotions and then send you downrange again. That doesn't work, right? At some level, that compartmentalization needs to hold true, right? So you can go do your job. Because if you're feeling it all the time, right, it makes, potentially you unsafe, the mission unsafe, the people to the right and left of you unsafe, right? Because that situational awareness is impacted. So some of it is, I think we are in the habit of putting Band-Aids on and sending people back out. And so at that transition mark, around that, whatever 18-year mark, is typically when people start coming into my office for a lot of different reasons. Some of it is to start saying, I'm ready to talk about it, right? I don't have anything to lose. I'm not going to be reprimanded at work. I won't be passed out for promotion. It's something I'm ready to start documenting for my VA records, whatever the case is. People start coming in and saying, okay, I'm ready to talk about it. I think the compartmentalization is starting to it's the cup runneth over, right? Like a tea kettle. It just starts to all boil up and spill out, and it's hard to contain it. And I think that's starting to happen as people are thinking about what the next steps are and transition in life 3.0. Okay, now what am I going to do? Right? Who am I going to be? Because this has been my whole life, right? And so when it's gone, does everything else go away? So I think that there's this fear of losing who I am with it. And so all of those memories and the feelings, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? The indifferent, all come up all at the same time, right? It's not this, I'm thinking about this one thing and I'm reliving this one thing. It's now I'm in all of it all the time. And it's harder to figure out how do I understand all of it. So I think that transition mark is really important, and people really start reliving things because they're trying to figure out what life is going to look like when I'm not doing this thing anymore, right?
Yeah. How common is it for, and everything that you're saying makes sense. It's almost like allergies, right? Like if somebody has a peanut allergy, or a tree nut allergy. They might be exposed to some and it really doesn't cause a reaction, but it stacks, right? Physiologically, allergies like that stack, and there's a tipping point, right, to where it all comes tumbling down. Do you see that very common, and how often do you see that for people that are transitioning to your point, right? They're going through this new environment, losing some of their identity or reshaping their identity. So how does that impact them?
Yeah, I think, sometimes, it depends on age and generation where people are at in their military career. A lot of times I would hear, oh, well, I was non-deployable. That doesn't mean that there wasn't toxic leadership or there wasn't something else going on. There wasn't MST. I've heard a lot of people that are on the JAG side, right, who are coming in and they have this vicarious or secondary trauma. It's not something happened to me, but I've been listening to horrific stories, or I'm reading reports, or I'm watching video, right? And I'm having this traumatic experience, but I didn't deploy, so it doesn't count. So I think part of it is awareness. And then the other thing that I see is, yeah, it stacks. And what I hear from people is it's usually stories that are, and stories in the narrative sense, not in a dismissive sense, where we say that in how we create a narrative in our own head, right? People will come in and they'll say, well, it was the Humvee here in that time, and it was, 06 that time, and it was Afghanistan that time, and it was a red car, and it's not one specific incident, typically I'm not seeing people that are coming in where they've had a horrific thing happen and they're having a PTSD response. When they're in this transitionary period, it's all of these different little pieces, the letter I had to write to this kid's parents, like it's a bunch of different things, and they're starting to remember it as if it's all one thing, right? It's starting to all flood back.
All bleed together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so picking it out and trying to figure out, okay, what pieces of this, right, are bothersome isn't helpful. I think what's helpful is to say, yep, this is what this looks like. It's post-traumatic stress. So can we work with the staying, into the, okay, and so what? How do we move through this, right? So the disordered piece we can work with, where it's not impacting your daily life, living, functioning, right, as any more than it needs to. Is it post-traumatic stress? Sure, of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Something traumatic happens, we have a response. That's stressful, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're both going to go?
No, go ahead.
So on your website, you have several different categories. You work with relationships, individuals, professionals, and the first responders and military.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed under your list for military and first responders is the returning to civilian life.
Yeah.
That to me is also a big one that's impacting a ton of people, myself included, making that transition, through retirement, and then also ties in nicely to us trying to find some sort of gainful employment after the military. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you help service members and first responders return, to civilian life.
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with, if you had a magic wand, right, and couldn't erase anything, and believe me, most people come in and that's not what they say. They don't want to give it up, right? It's so, the good and the bad, it's so important that they don't want to erase that piece of it, right? So it's like, okay, if you could create anything, what would that look like? And it starts with, I just want to break. Like, if I could just take 6 months and catch my breath, right? Or I don't want to be in a leadership role anymore. So sometimes it's really just starting with, let's just create the life 3.0, right? Let's create this magic wand scenario where you could, envision whatever it is that you wanted to do, right? What does that look like? And then what's getting in your way from actually creating that? Some people, it's finances, right? Other people, it's young children, it's having to move again, it's whatever, right? So it's really trying to work with top down. Let's take the scenario, let's see what pieces of it we can actually make work for you. And then, okay, what's the self-sabotage? What are you getting in your way about? Because most people will say, I don't know who I am. Ah, that's a different question. That's not, I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire. You know, I don't know who I am, or I don't know who I'm going to be, or what if I never get over this, right? That's more about the moral injury that comes with post-traumatic stress or trauma or PTSD, right? Is this internal injury, and I don't know how to move beyond that. What is that going to look like? So we start working with that.
Do you find that there are and I'm really super interested in this because I actually I was a medic in the Air Force, and so one of our wards at our hospital was the Gulf War syndrome ward, and so there were all sorts of studies being done on PTSD and you know all the things that were associated with that. You know, this is probably right up your alley. One of the things that they were talking about was training your brain, right? To how to overcome and how to cope. And so are you getting into like some of the exercises to help kind of reroute synaptic responses and things like that? And how do you do that?
Yeah, I always start with skills. So that's anything from cognitive behavioral or CBT skills, dialectical behavior, DBT skills, which is more of a mind-body connection, that idea of breath work, and meditation, in addition to thought stopping and redefining that negative self-talk and how we think about things, to something more targeted cognitive processing therapy, which is the very specific model that takes people through an incident, and it's a 7 to 12 session experience, and the idea is that they've worked through it. So something that's very empirically based, skill centered, to something more body based, like EMDR, eye movement rapid desensitization, which is more about how we process and hold trauma. So yes, absolutely. The skills is fundamentally important. I usually start there. Most people will come in and they either will tell me very little and just say, I'm just here because, I've never done therapy before. And, my buddy or my wife or somebody told me, I need to go, but I don't have an issue. Right. Or they come in and they're like, here's the most horrific thing that happened. And I feel like a lot of times that's a test, because I actually know I'm a civilian, never been in the military. I will never pretend that I've been in the military. And so I think sometimes people come in and they kind of test the water, and they're like, let me tell you this one horrific thing and see how you respond, right? How she responds. And then maybe I can trust her. So there's that trust developing. And I've gotten to do some pretty cool stuff. And in my other office, I have awards, and, but even then, it's a lot of acronyms and language and that dark sense of humor. And I think really people need that connection right before they're willing to do the work. And it makes sense. Like, why would you tell somebody you don't trust your story? You wouldn't. So, of course, that makes perfect sense. And, I've got, tell you stories upon stories of, I'm not going to swear, but garbage that some of the teams that I get to work with have done to me. It's quite entertaining. I was, left on a train platform while they waved at me on a different train, and like, you name it. And then I complained and they told me to sit my rear end down because I'd been recycled. So, so much of that is fundamentally important, right? To developing trust. So, I start with skills and I'm like, hey, let's just see if this works. If it doesn't work, cool, wrong theory. Like, if it doesn't work for 3 weeks in a row, wrong therapist. Let's send you to somebody great. Like, you don't like me, that's fine. I'll send you somewhere good, right? because right now, being trauma informed is sort of a buzzword, and there's a lot of people out there that say it, but they don't have the experience, right? And being military informed, because there's a cultural component. Every branch is different. There's, different structures within each branch, right? Being culturally competent is really important when it comes to working with service members as well. So
Yeah, amen to that.
Are you saying we have trust issues?
no, why would I say that?
Well, I think and Sean, you can talk to this because you're in the thick of it right now. But what does the military teach? I mean, one of the biggest factors is resiliency, right?
Yeah.
And so it's adapt and overcome and be resilient, right? And you're going to get through this one way or the other. And so I think that's ingrained in soldiers and airmen and sailors and Marines. And so I think that's why it's such an issue, because everything is swept under the rug. It's not addressed. And then it just blows, like you said, it's stacked and it just blows up and people just implode.
Yeah.
What are some of the, I guess, job seeker things? Because this is also a transition show, right? So what are some of the things that you see people that are transitioning, and maybe they're dealing with well, obviously, if you're talking with them, they probably are dealing with PTSD. And how does that play into their success or failure as far as transition goes?
Yeah, there's so many things you said there that are worth addressing. I think the resiliency piece it's important in the moment, and it gets in the way sometimes, because I think we assume that, well, I've had all this training and I've been so resilient, right? I've done my job, I've done it well, and now all of a sudden I'm having an issue, right? With big air quotes. It's so much more about resiliency, right? And it's being able to redefine, well, what does resiliency look like now, right? And what is it going to look like when I'm no longer in the military and I'm doing a different job? And I think really being aware of what my pitfalls are and what the things that light me up are going to be really different than somebody else. And so we start trying to pick those things apart. And it's interesting because some people come in and they're like, I'm here because I think I should be. And it's almost like I'm not sure if I have PTS or PTSD. I don't even know how to contextualize that, or I've been in for 30 years. And so I just figured I probably should talk to somebody. So I see a lot of people who actually aren't sure. They're not sure what they come in with what they should be feeling. And so that to me is about the transition, right? So, I want to look at, well, what makes you what do you know pushes your buttons? Is it people being late? Okay, well, when you go and work in the civilian world, guess what? People are what, because that's not it for everybody, right? Is it disrespect? Is it people don't understand? Is it that the room, just the environment isn't set up where it feels comfortable, right? So what are these things? Can we try and guess? What are some of the things that are going to push your buttons when you're in a different working environment, right? And okay, and let's work with that. And then that's where, as you were talking before about the skills, right? That's where the skills part comes in. Okay, let's just work with this, right? And we try and learn new skills without having to completely dismantle the old skills, because that doesn't work. We have to sort of very slowly implement something new. So much of it is awareness, right? I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know what to expect, and that's terrifying. What's it going to look like when I don't have to wear a uniform every day? Well, what? I don't even know what that's going to look like. And that sounds so trite and silly, and you're smiling, right? Because it can be day stopping for somebody, right? That can be the thing that pushes someone over the edge to the point where they cannot function, right? They're so overwhelmed because the lack of structure. So sometimes it's like, all right, well, let's lay out your clothes the night before. And I know that sounds ridiculous, right? It's these little things that people haven't been taught the skills to work with the adversity in a different way. And so it's taking what they do know with that resiliency training and going, hey, you already know this stuff. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We're just going to rework it in a different way. We're going to create a schedule. You're going to get up at this time. You're going to go to bed at that time. We're going to put PT in. We're going to put your week's worth of clothes out. We're going to implement this structure, because I think that's the biggest thing is somebody goes from being very structured to having no structure. And then that's overwhelming, right? And that overwhelming causes the anxiety. And then we can see kind of how that ball, right, or that thing spirals. So it starts for me there with what's going on with that.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And the resiliency thing is kind of interesting, at least on the Army side, because I've been a resiliency instructor for several years, and every time we do a course, we run into those people who, oh, you're making the Army soft, this and all those stigmas behind it, and those people never embrace it at all, and that's what it is. But I know we're pretty close to ending time here, so before we ask you about your company and how people can reach out to you and things like that, talk to us a little bit about the stigma that comes with seeking some sort of counseling or help or something like that, because it's still rampant in the military, and I've sought help for anger management a few times. One of these times it'll stick, but I use that example with my soldiers all the time to let them know that, hey, it didn't stop me. I'm still here. I'm still going. Get past the stigma. It's not there. But how else can we work on that?
Yeah, I think I really think it's an internal, in other words, in the military, right? So much of it is really being able to say, it's okay to go talk to somebody, right? It's okay to not be perfect all the time. It's okay to have, emotions and experiences that maybe don't track with, your unit or your, whichever, right? I think some of it is that, and I think some of it is really starting to be clear on what disordered means, right? And what PTSD looks like, because all I think we as civilians know is what we see on TV. And that isn't necessarily an accurate representation, right? And so some of it is education on the civilian side. I think a lot of it, though, is internal and being able to change ideology, and that is hard. If it were that easy, everybody would be doing it, right? Simple concept, not easy. And so a lot of it is ideology, and that being resilient absolutely doesn't mean that one is not going to react to something that's traumatic and stressful, right? I can have a traumatic reaction and still be resilient. Those two things can both be true. And so I think we put this in an either or paradigm, and we do a disservice. People are very resilient. And so how do we help them embrace that resiliency and also experience what they've experienced, and give them room to talk through that or work through that with whatever that looks like for people.
Yeah. And leverage it, right? Leverage that experience for a positive outcome.
Yeah. And it takes leaders talking about it. It really does. I mean, it takes leadership coming in and saying, I did this thing, you can do this thing, having good MFLACs, right, that are going to be there and actually do the work and not be the go-between, but between UCMJ and reporting and all of that. And I know I don't know really what I'm talking about. It just
dropping all the acronyms. You got it all. You got it down.
It's very complicated, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't think there's a quick and easy solution. So
Yeah, it's going to take a concerted effort by the community, right, to support the efforts of the not only the individuals but the entire group or base of people that are experiencing that. And like you said, I mean, and hopefully this is something that we're going to hear about from you in just a second.
yes.
But hopefully there's people like you that are out there helping educate employers, the public, right, on some of the nuances that people are going through and how to support people and not have that stigma come in and be a negative, right? Being able to work with those people and again produce the best possible outcome because they are resilient. People are resilient and they can overcome it. They just need some help, and not just by someone like you with your profession, but again, the community.
Yeah. There's a lot of really great transition programs out there and nonprofits. LinkedIn and Twitter have a ton of them listed. There are resources for universities about working with veteran students. Usually universities have a veteran center, and professors are having to do training and acclimate their learning styles, whether it's over Zoom or back in the classroom. So there's stuff that really is helpful that's going on in an academic world and more, in the career setting. There's a lot of nonprofits. My favorite big information house is Psych Armor. And if anybody listening wants to know, like, how do you start working with military and veterans, and what does the workplace look like, or what are some of the issues that people that are transitioning are facing, Psych Armor has free education and webinars. They have a ton of information out there. There are organizations like yours. There's a lot of stuff out there, and employers, in my opinion, really don't have an excuse to not be prepared to have veteran, and retired first responders coming into their work environment. There's so much out there, and it really is just take an hour webinar. And I know, again, it sounds so simple, right? There's a ton of really great information as far as how employers can bring in the veteran community and what they may expect, the pros and cons of doing that, right? I'm very lucky with my job, and I've got a great team. I actually have one person that's AGR Air Force, and she's been Air Force for a very long time, and she works with me part-time, and her wing commander has been kind enough to let her come work for me and do her job still. And then I have two retired military folks. So it's a unique perspective. I think that's going to make changes. More people going to psych school, not people like me, but people that have done the job, and going and being the counselors who can sit there and say, I get it, because they get it from having done the job, right? I can get it just a little bit, So
yeah, that's important. Have you heard of the Mission Daybreak that the VA is putting on?
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked into anything like that?
A little bit, yeah.
I've talked to a couple of people that actually have plans. In fact, one person we're trying to bring on here is doing things with horses.
Mm-hmm.
To help veterans that are struggling, and they're trying to work through this Mission Daybreak thing, which is, if you're not familiar, Mark, it's a VA sponsored grant program to try to, I don't know if solves the right word, but reduce the veteran suicides. So they're looking for ideas, essentially. So I didn't know if you had looked at that at all, Joelle.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, equine therapy is they're amazing. There's so many things out there. The issue with VA and with TRICARE is these are huge organizations, and there's years of brokenness, and they work well for some things and not well for other things, and so it's very frustrating, and it's just not fast enough. And the other issue is people like me, providers, have a very difficult time being in network with the VA and with TRICARE. I'm one of very few in the Bay Area. And part of it is they make it difficult for providers to engage in services or provide services. And so we've got to do more on both fronts, where we're bringing in more types of therapies, we're bringing in more providers, we're bringing in more training, right? That needs to happen for transition to prevent suicide on PTSD across the board for all of the things that veterans deal with. They have a unique set of circumstances, right? Not better or worse, just unique, that employers and the community need to be aware of. And instead of trying to put this spin where this is broken, this is ineffective, this is maladaptive, that's not helpful. So
yeah, glass half empty for sure.
So we're getting down to time here, Joelle. So I wanted to give you a few seconds here to basically let people know how they can contact you. We have your website and your LinkedIn if there's a preferred method. If there's any services you want to promote or really tell us about real quick, and where you want people to go, or if there's ways people can help you or support you, anything like that we can try to spread the word on.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. And you've got the spelling of my name. That's always the hardest thing for people, because our socials are all my name. But yeah, and I joke and say we're on all the socials, whatever that means. I don't know. I'm old. I don't pay attention to this. I have a team that does this stuff for me. But yeah, I mean, we provide services throughout California, actually, in several other states. I do a lot of stuff with training, and I'd love to come and talk with people. I've done everything from stand down trainings and again, working with active duty soft teams, to training law enforcement on resiliency and what trauma looks like. And people are always encouraged, if I don't know the answer, I've got a great team and can point people to, like, hey, try this service. It's getting the information out there. Military One Source is great. Give an Hour is great. They have services, and they have mental health services for people. And both of those organizations have free care for people. So it doesn't matter if you have TRICARE or not. There are people in those networks that will offer care. So I just reach out, and I'd love to come and help. If there are people listening that don't know how to get started or need training, let me know. And thanks for asking.
That is outstanding. So we're going to go ahead and close it out. Mark, did you have anything else?
No, I'd just say, guys, be sure to take a picture, take a screenshot right now. Make sure that you show Joelle some love and her organization, and make sure that you blow her up on social media. So she's up all night tonight commenting back to the chat. So thank you, Joelle, for sharing. Super interesting. And I'd like to connect with you further. I know we connected. Yeah. But I'd like to talk with you a little bit more about your family counseling and things like that too, because I'm interested. I've got PTSD because I've got a 8, a 6, and a 4-year-old. So I've got a little PTSD of my own. So
mine are 20 and 22. One just graduated from college, and that'll do it too. I'm like, wait, I thought we were financially independent. No? Oh, okay.
The boomerang is alive and well.
It never stops. Great.
I
was getting all excited. I got a senior this year, so it doesn't stop yet. Okay.
No.
All right, Joelle, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Your comments in the chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next time.
That's right. Remember, don't drown in the sea of transition. Grab your vet SOS lifeline, and we're out.